you can do. So thanks everyone for joining us today for that conference in the cloud for the Perl and Raku community. This is my pleasure to introduce you Artem Golubev, co-founder and CEO of TestTrigger, which can help you improve test coverage by reducing the amount of manual testing at the same time. And Artem 20-minute talk is about autonomous testing. So your turn, you have the mic.
Great. Hi, everyone, and I'm excited to be here and talk to you about what is autonomous testing, how can you do that? And I will walk you through different challenges which we had seen with testing a lot in my career, and different approaches of autonomous testing. How would you do it if you were to do it yourself? And what's available out there. All right, so currently, what are the most prevalent ways to test your web or mobile application if you were to write one? So you can write automation testing using Selenium, Test Cafe, or something like that. You can use one of plentiful record and play tools to create tests, or you can do some manual testing. And why this in the first place? $60 billion lost in US due to bugs alone, and overall lack of reputation. You can have churn of customers just because of the bugs. So let's talk about test automation and why is it a problem? I would assume that everyone believes that test needs to be automated. If not, just we're talking about how quickly you can retest your software if there is a new version. If you're just one person writing your own software, is probably not worth it. But if you have at least two people or more, clearly you would want to do some automation. And clearly, you would want to automate your testing, and specifically UI testing. So, there are three, as you know, all know, there are three different types of tests you could do. There is unit tests and plentiful framework out there. We're big believers that everyone should do unit tests for their code. Then there are tests, integration tests. Again, people would do those. And I will talk today about end-to-end tests, because we believe that end-to-end tests are the ones which bring the most value if you can do them right. Right? We all know multiple challenges with end-to-end tests. Such as, for example, Salesforce have built more than 1 million functional end-to-end tests, and up to 80% of their tests are failing due close to release. They release several times a year, which is mind-boggling. Each test, by the way, by our estimation, costed them about $1,000 to build. So this is a super, super expensive way to have an end-to-end test coverage in there. In general, it's actually not an exception. It's more like a rule, because statistically speaking, what we have seen is that for Selenium tests, anywhere between 3 and 8% of all tests will always fail, which might be okay if you do run manually. However, if you want to do just automation and use it as a semaphore in your CI/CD, that's a big bummer, because your semaphore will always be red and will not allow to deploy anything. That's still, though, probably not the largest issue with test automation. The largest probably being test maintenance. Again, we estimate you would spend 2.5 times more effort on test maintenance on every test compared to test creation. And in general, it's just a ginormous drain of resources. Think about it. Why would you maintain your tests and spend a lot of time just maintaining tests if the whole goal of them is we're running and basically providing value. And finally, and this is related to the talk, the third issue is, well, basically test creation. There is a statistics that are only around 30% of all documented end-to-end tests are automated today in 2020, which is mind-boggling. And I've monitored this number over the years, and it does not seem to change much. So overall, that what it tells me is that it's actually pretty hard to create automation in the first place. And manual testing, of course, is just, you would think it would be much different and better, but it's not really, because the problem there is you would need to document those. If you were to use third party to basically do your testing for you, then your tests should be thoroughly documented. It's basically almost exactly as software programming, but you're just writing a document explaining what needs to be done. And of course, this approach doesn't always even work anyway. So you would probably test manually, locally, training your people to on how to use your application, and that's just an expensive and slow process in general. And of course, if you need to quickly redeploy Blocker in production, you're kind of out of luck. And talk about that. So yeah, there is a plug and play out there, and well, somebody, it does not completely solve the problem. Somebody would need to create those tests in the first place, which might be a little bit more effort than you would think. And then supporting those is a double nightmare, because any changes to your application will basically throw away those tests, and your only solution to that would be re-record everything from scratch, which is mind-boggling. And of course, most of the tools are not stable, though there are exceptions. Okay. So now let's talk about the fun stuff on how would we do, how would you do autonomous testing, right? Let's say you want to cover your application with tests. What are possible ways to do that? And like in its challenge on its own, let me walk you through and basically converge it to a different problem altogether. Let's think of testing and all possible things which you can do very step by step, and then figure out what we should test in the first place. So the question is, can we do tests? The question is more, what should we test? If you think about any application, like thinking a little bit longer, you'll realize that there are actually trillions and quadrillions different ways how you can test your application, different flows. Not that's just how you can test it, but what I'm talking about is different end-to-end scenarios on your application. There are trillions of them. So you literally think of it this way. It's just a simple example of why it is so huge. So every time you get to to a screen, like not only a number of possibilities what you can do on that screen is equal to a number of different actions like links and buttons on the screen. It's actually also multiplied by 2 in a factor of number of inputs on every screen. If you were to test positive and negative inputs, just even one negative input for every input you have on the screen. So it explodes just very, very, very quickly. For web application, you can have trillions of different ways to test application. Mobile applications are a little bit more simple. We might have in certain cases more limited functionality and more limited, therefore, a number of overall flows which your user could go through, although they could still be ginormous. Just think about it. One example, well, just purely from mathematical perspective, how a system could, or somebody could go through your application just even on sign-in screen. A user can fill out inputs, and then instead of clicking sign-in button, as a user could click forgot the password, sign up, stuff like that. And like if you think about it and calculate number of different flows that user can perform on your application, the number is just huge. Now, therefore, when you're thinking about autonomous testing, you shouldn't think about, hey, how do we generate tests? It's a question about how do we select automatically what needs to be tested on your application. That is what autonomous testing challenge is about. So in order to test your application, the system should be able to go through your application. And in order to test those, so number one challenge is like, how does it go through the paths which brings the most value to users? So you can't test everything. It would be trillions of combinations, trillions and end-to-end flows. You can, therefore, the system should be able to choose what's important enough to be tested. And let's say you want to do it, it might be a good idea in your application, depending how it's built. You could build it yourself. I'll just give away the ideas on what's possible. There are 2 ways that I'm familiar with on how to build end-to-end tests, which might bring at least some degree of proper selection of the end-to-end flows which needs to be tested. And those are kind of a crawler-based test generation or analytics-based test generation. Let me walk you through first the crawler-based test generation. So basically, your idea is to make sure that you go through like all the functionality which you need to build to test and cover it with tests. And there are some chats. Slides are not stuck. I'm just not advancing them. So what to test is what I'm talking about in here. So everything's fine. Okay, so it's just a big topic. So another interesting way of doing that is, of course, you all control your application. If you are like you're part of the team which builds the application, then you kind of know what is it about, right? So in theory, you could build a kind of finite automata representation of how your application work, and then generate tests going through possible states in order to just cover everything. That's actually an anecdote, and I did work with a person who did just that. Like he was absolutely epic gentleman, and he graduated from MIT and got hired by Microsoft to do testing. And like at that time, it was a task to test macro assembler, if people remember still that thing which Microsoft had. I don't know if you still have it. And like he was tasked to basically test it and write some automation test, and he approached it very creatively. He literally did create a finite automata of how compiler works, and generated thousands of tests, ran them, and found a lot of bugs. Very creative approach. So literally people did that tens of years ago. It's nothing new in here. So that's a way to do it for a more simple application. And by the way, we might do it on your own. It's not that a big deal if your application is simple enough. Although he tried to do it later in a company we worked together, and this approach unfortunately did not work. I wish. And the problem was that just finite automata itself would be so gigantic. It's not only will not be a planar graph which you can put comfortably enough draw on a plane. It just would be impossible to manage and understand because of its ginormous size and complexity. So unfortunately, that just didn't work. But again, depending on complexity of this application, might or might not work. And so how would you do that then? So you want to still build test cases based on something which is important, but do it a little bit more automatically. And another idea, which is mentioned in here, is to try to figure out a set of rules which would guide your test case building or generation of your test cases through your application. And this way, you can build application, especially if you pair it with crawler. That might actually result in good results. So we actually have seen good results came out of it. You'd be surprised, but just one rule which nudged a system to go through first non-trivial sign-up steps were able to generate around 400 functional end-to-end tests, like vast majority of which were meaningful for some mobile applications. So this approach does work for a mobile application, and the number of rules you might need to create is small compared to the number of tests you will end up with. So this is one way to do it. It's basically kind of old, same old, nothing new, rule-based crawler, or in general, something rule-based, right?
Sorry to interrupt. we need to terminate in about 1 minute, okay?
Yep. And then finally, the second way of doing that is based on analytics. you're gathering a lot of analytics. Think about it. Like everyone, I'm pretty sure, have Google Analytics on their websites. And you could use analytics data to figure out what are most frequently used end-to-end flows on your application and build end-to-end test cases based on that. So, and on that, I'm over time, I apologize. This is how you could build your own autonomous test or generate tests autonomously. Or, sorry for shameless plugin here, you could use test trigger. It will do any of this for you. And on that, like I would love to finish, and thank you so much for pinging me about time. And is there time for